All right, so thanks everyone for coming out. We've got quite a big crowd here. Lots of new faces. Uh, Someone has, I think, tried to approximate Venus's audio cue.
That's right.
Um, Thanks, Band Aid. You always got to rep those that are not here. Um, what I figured I'd start off. So we're starting off with um, what I termed, I think, in the description of the Q&A as Norse expansion. And really, I just didn't want to say Vikings because Vikings, as a specific term, applies to a particular period in kind of Scandinavian history. But I think maybe I did end up saying Vikings in the end, just because it's so easy in the English-speaking world. We just sort of call these things Vikings, call it all the Viking period, the Viking people. But I've got a oops, I've got a just tried to drag the Google Map on my OBS window. That's not going to work. Um, I got a Google Map up here, and I've got it up here to show the geography of kind of the Viking world or the Scandinavian world, because not all of us are experts on European geography. So what we are going to be dealing with um, the area kind of in here. Oh, I've got my stop with these fucking pop-ups. I have my, what did I call it now? Uh, Annotator. Yeah, I'm not blind. I can draw on the screen. I've got the magic pencil. So, in general, the Vikings are going to come from this area here. That's the most populated areas of what is called Scandinavia. And it is called Scandinavia because of this region here, which historically is called Skane, or in modern days is called Skane, um, and historically was called Scania. Um, Even though Scandinavia has been Latinized, it originally meant in the regional languages kind of Skane Island. The idea that this entire area here, they didn't actually know, but they assumed it was an island, and it was of these people. And so it's just sort of referring to the people of this general area. Nowadays, Scandinavia has a very specific meaning, so it refers to Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, but because they are linguistically distinct, it does not refer to Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. There are other terms that kind of encompass like either Baltics or the Nordics. Nordic is a more broad term that can refer to these other regions. But yeah, that's why it's called Scandinavia, and that's the area predominantly that we'll be interested in. But also all the places that these people, the Norse, go, which involves Great Britain, Iceland, Greenland, and the New World, but also through the river systems, um, through Kiev and other cities here, as well as to Istanbul, and then Italy, the west coast of Iberia. This is Iberia is the name of the peninsula here with Spain and Portugal, and then of course all over and all through France, Germany, and across the Baltics. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of jump in. Unless is there any questions about that little tidbit there? Okay, I'm just going to move on then. Oh, and if anybody wants to put anything into text chat, like links or ideas or questions, longer questions or anything like that, please use the Vikings and Authoritarianism. I don't even thread. I think it's
Reddit.
called. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I've created. It just makes things cleaner and easier, and also better to refer back to when people want to, kind of go to a specific topic that we've covered in the past. Okay, so because I am always obsessed with providing context, I'm not going to start at the Viking Age. I'm going to give you context from before and then kind of move forward from that. So I just wanted to give an idea of um, the Iron Age in Scandinavia and what the situation was before people started to kind of spread outwards from this kind of region outlined in red, and why some ideas as to why they might have done so. Um, Generally speaking, this area is benefiting greatly from its proximity to, in the earlier years, a united Roman Empire. So, this area is, you can see here, this is lists of settlements by date, and they're kind of color coded. And I mean, the Roman Empire doesn't really get started until this last date here, but this is kind of progressive expansion of Germanic settlements. And what we see during the Roman period, and kind of extending to what we call the kind of post-Roman period, or late antiquity, or the early Middle Ages. This is kind of from 400 on, in that region, is just a whole lot of wealth accumulating. Um, there is increasing um, connection with the outside world, and there's a lot of Roman gold, and Roman objects are being brought in as trade goods, and kind of evidence for attempts at securing stronger power. So you have like a regional chieftain who wants to be more than that, wants to be what eventually is we would call a king. And so you have what's called a centralization of power, but it's an imperfect process. One area will start accumulating wealth, and then you'll find it gets wrecked by another area, and then their wealth gets transferred over. So there's competition for throughout Scandinavia, but at a certain point, and this is basically right before the Viking Age, we start to see some real winners, and you get the establishment of um, specific kingdoms, Kingdom of Norway, and then later the Kingdom of Denmark and Sweden, where power is more closely held by the king, and you have a kind of a group of individuals who want to strike out on their own, either with authority from the king, or just sort of on their own doing whatever they want. And we can see the kind of material culture of the Iron Age. There, if I were a specialist in Scandinavian archaeology, I would be able to tell you very specifically changes over the centuries. But to my amateur and inexperienced eyes, I see a lot of continuity. A longhouse, they change slightly in form over the years, but a longhouse is a longhouse. We have, rune stones. The text and the script do change over time, but by this point, the younger Futhark is established, and that's the form of runic inscriptions for some time. Oh yeah, we have. There's a lot of bogs in the region, and these provide a low oxygen environment, anoxic environment, if you are familiar with the terminology. And what that allows for is some amazing preservation of organic materials, really creepy bodies, because if a body is deposited into the bog, they don't decompose, because you need oxygen to feed the bacteria that would normally kind of eat away at the flesh. But you also get textiles, clothing, shoes, these sorts of things, fabrics, other things that wouldn't preserve. There are these wonderful wagons. I don't know if I have them up here. No, I don't have the wagons. I put the ships up, so I'm just gonna take a moment to look at this. This is a wagon that was actually ceremonially deposited. So it was taken apart and deposited in an anoxic environment. I don't think it was a bog, but it was equally kind of low oxygen. And so this is, there's some restoration here. This black metal is new, and it's holding up the fragmentary pieces. But this is a wagon from probably around circa 600 AD sort of deal, which is pretty
Wow.
cool. Yeah, you get some really immaculate preservation. Yeah. So, if you've ever heard of the poem Beowulf, now first things first, Beowulf is a an Old English poem. It is not written in Old Norse, but it talks about events that happen in Scandinavia, in kind of the area of Norse settlement. And so you've got Hrothgar, who's king of the Danes. He's Danish king, and he's got a mead hall like this. It's kind of an evolution of a longhouse. And he invites Beowulf in to help him defeat the Grendel, which has been plaguing his people. I've never read Beowulf myself, but I did read the Michael Crichton novel Eaters of the Dead. So that was adapted as the 13th Warrior, I think, the movie with Antonio Banderas, and I figure that's close enough. But this takes place, like I said, in the region that kind of Vikings come from, but it is an English poem, and that just underscores actually the close relationship between the Angles and Saxons that settled into what is now modern day England and the Norse that follow them centuries later. If I'm going to go back to the map here for half a second, the Angles and the Saxons and the another group is called the Jutes. So this peninsula here, this is called the Jutland Peninsula, and it's called the Jutland Peninsula because Jutes come from here. And so this region, I think, is where Saxony is, and Angles, I think, come from over here. And so you've got Jutes, Angles, and Saxons in the 400s. They kind of migrate over to England and conquer from the Romano-British and Celtic inhabitants this region, and they speak Old English and so on and so forth. And then the Vikings who follow hundreds of years later, they speak a different language and they have a different culture, but it's closely related. They're not so distant cousins, and this this leads to a couple of interesting things that happen with the English language. It's one of the things that really changed the intersection between these Old Norse speakers and these Old English speakers living side by side is what prompted the development of Middle English, which is very, very different from Old English. If you've ever heard of a poet named Chaucer, he writes in Middle English, and you can't really understand it, but you can definitely understand it better than Old English, which it looks like the Icelandic sagas. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. Sorry. So this I just wanted to show what a reconstructed Viking longhouse would look like. You can have this as a imagine giant fire in there and seating for local nobility, where he would meet with um, the term used most often in Viking context is jarl. In English, this eventually turns into the term earl. So if you've ever heard of like the Earl of Sandwich or Earl of what have you as a nobility title, that is that descends from the Norse title of jarl, and a jarl was like just a knight of the king kind of thing. This is Trelleborg Fortress, well, a reconstruction of Trelleborg Fortress, and it just shows the kind of uh, style of Viking fortifications of the era. It's all wood construction, so susceptible to fire. Those that have gone to historic forts in North America, definitely the architecture is going to be different, but the wood construction is probably going to seem kind of similar. So this is kind of we see uh, a lot of fortresses or forts colonial era forts in North America constructed of the same material, but again, very different, very different architecture. This is a preserved longship. So this is there would be a giant sail on here, and this is the primary mode of transportation for seagoing vessels. Like this is how Vikings travel, is on long ships. There's another one here that also would have had a sail, and these boats are pretty damned impressive. They're pretty good for traveling. This is actually really, really good here. Do you see how Google Maps takes some of the water here and colors it a lot darker than this other water? That is to indicate the relative depth of the water. So we actually preserve this in discussions of a country's navy. We talk about a blue water navy, which is the deep ocean going navy, and a brown water navy, which is this lighter blue area. And so if you only have a brown water navy, that means you can't your ships can't go into the deep water of the ocean. They'll just be destroyed. And no one in the Middle Ages, no one has a blue water navy. All ships are restricted to these kind of coastal waters. And the people who have the best ships for these coastal waters are the Scandinavians. And they get through, they are able to also traverse not just the shallow waters, but also rivers. So they go through the great rivers of Europe and terrorize the interior of the continent with these longships.
Hey, I have a question,
Sure.
and you might be about to talk about it. I've seen in some different medias stories of these guys carrying the longboats from like one river to another, or people think they're safe on land, and they're just like, surprise, there's a boat in your yard, and then they kill everybody. Did they do that stuff?
Yeah, so it was it's not quite as easy to like portage a canoe as it is to take a long ship up on land. But I do have some things that I've read. Also, I mean, let's just be honest. If you're interested in Vikings, you've probably seen an episode or two of the Vikings TV show when oh God, what's his name? Um, Ragnar Lothbrok has them take the ships up the cliffs and then transports them over land. To the best of my, I don't know if it happened exactly as they depicted in the TV show, but to the best of my knowledge, that is an actual historical event that it may not have been Ragnar Lothbrok because he's kind of mytho-historical, but the Vikings invading England at the time were able to take their ships over land short distances. We're not talking. They're not
Yeah.
traversing the entire continent. But the ships were light enough, and the Vikings dedicated enough that they were able to kind of do a limited version of like a portage with a canoe.
Cool. All right. I was hoping that was it. True, because it's sweet.
Because it's sweet, right? Yeah. Any
Yeah.
other questions so far? All right. I'm
Nope.
gonna. Sorry, did someone chime in?
I said nope.
Ah, fair enough. Um, I just put this article in here because I'm not an expert on weapons and armor, but I know that a lot of people really geek out about it, and I didn't want to skip over it entirely. But I just have the generic Wikipedia article here, and I was planning on looking at a couple of images because, I mean, I'm not sure. Like, there's a spear; it's used to spear things. That's kind of all. That's all you're gonna get out of me. I'm sorry. I don't know anything about military formations or specific kind of Viking tactics, other than um, they didn't have particularly sophisticated siege weapons. So when it comes to trying to siege down larger cities, they have to try a couple of times before they figure it out, and that's a pretty common thing with a lot of nomadic raiders. Um, you'll find the same thing when during the Arab conquests, when you get to a particularly well defended city, the Arabs just don't know how to do sieges on really, really well defended cities. They can take down the lesser defended ones just fine, but it takes them a while to develop the proficiency or to incorporate enough people who have the proficiency to develop things like sapping of city walls and that sort of thing. So shield, round shields, very portable. This is teardrop style shields in a bio tapestry, but that's many centuries later. These are technically Normans, not. So I'll get into that. I will get into that. This is where I stole that helmet. So swords, yeah. So unless anybody has any specific questions about weapons or armor, I'm gonna kind of move on from here. Okay.
You said it was iron, right? That they use mostly
Yes.
Iron
So
Age stuff.
yeah, in there's a very limited Bronze Age in Scandinavia. They don't really have local tin sources, and when they did start to develop, trade networks and so on, a lot of that tin had already been kind of monopolized by other people, and so they didn't really have good access to it. And so bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin, um, they did it for a while, but eventually they actually start to delve directly into ironworking, but it's really, really rough stuff. There's an ample supply of what's called bog iron in Scandinavia. And so this is kind of natural iron nodules that develop again in this anoxic environment of the bogs. And, people found that you could just kind of mine the bog for this bog iron. It's got a lot of inclusions, though. It's really low quality, but you could work it, and it's hard as shit, and you can stab people with a sword after you make it. So initially, a lot of the iron weapons that come out of Scandinavia don't look very pretty, but they're effective. And then over time, they develop kind of traditional ironworking technology and ironworking get involved in iron trade networks, and get to have pretty well made iron weapons. Anything else? Okay.
Nope.
This I probably should have, because I already started talking about the inscription, but writing in Scandinavia did exist, even when they were kind of more insular towards themselves, and that Elder Futhark is the kind of the runic inscription language. So these are little symbols here are the runes, and that develops into Younger Futhark, which is so Elder Futhark is more Pan Germanic. Younger Futhark is more related to Scandinavia. That's the evolution of Futhark as it developed in the Scandinavian region. And I had an image of this stone here, where this down the center is a much older Elder Futhark inscription, and then many years later, this snake with the kind of belt decorations, and it's covered in Younger Futhark script, was added to this stone. And I think a lot of the nerds in the audience might already know this, but just in case nobody does, you already know a little bit of Nordic ruins. A ruler that we will talk about again. I'm only going to go into a very little brief amount of detail on him right now, named Harold Bluetooth. That might already jog some people's minds. But when they were developing Bluetooth, which is a technology that connects, all of your devices wirelessly, they had to come up with a name. And I was just rewatching a Tom Scott video when he talked about this. It was an Intel engineer who was not Swedish himself, but had chatted with a Swedish guy who told him about uh, um, Harold Bluetooth, and he's like, "Oh, that sounds like a technology," because Harold Bluetooth unites the various kingdoms. And so,
Blåtand.
pardon me.
Blåtand.
Is that how to pronounce his first name or last name?
Last name.
Okay.
That is Bluetooth.
Oh, fair enough. And and so that the word that he just used there started with a B, and or a B, and that is where we get the symbol for Bluetooth from, because the rune for H, the H sound, looks like an asterisk, and then the B is kind of like a beta, and so when you combine the asterisk over the beta, that's when you get the logo for Bluetooth. And those are
That is cool.
that's the younger Futhark, so that's specifically the Scandinavian writing system. So every time you connect your wireless headset to your phone, you're actually kind of integrating into centuries-long Viking history. How does that sound?
So I have that guy to blame when my car drops my phone and I'm screaming in traffic.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna blame that guy.
Okay, I think that these shouldn't be in here. I don't want to talk about that just yet. So I'm gonna close that one.
I'm guessing that's where my family name of Harold comes from, because my grandpa was Harold, my great grandpa was Harold, and I'm pretty sure it goes back to our Norse heritage, from what I could tell.
Potentially, I mean, it's pretty hard to establish first name traditions over a period of 1,000 years. That I'd say is difficult.
Yeah, my aunt did manage to trace our family line back that direction a little over 1,000 years, but yeah, it can be a little convoluted when you get that far back.
To say the least. A little convoluted, yeah. That's fair. So, what I'm going to talk, that's kind of the historical context for the Viking era. And did anyone have any questions or any kind of conversation? Sorry, Relica, that was a conversation leading off from that. So sorry if I've cut you off there. But any further on the kind of the historical context that we just sort of covered for before the Viking era?
Nope.
Nope.
You're
Okay.
good.
Sounds good. So what we will do now is we're going to jump into what is generally agreed to be the kind of the beginning of the Viking era. It's not really, because attacks had happened before this, but this is kind of the first fairly traumatic attack, at least as far as the authorities are concerned. They didn't really care if peasant villages had been sacked before. Lindisfarne is a monastery on the east coast of Britain, and it's just off the coast of York. Let's see if I can. Where is York? Is here. Hold on. Oh, it's further north than I thought. So this is Lindisfarne, and it is called the Holy Island, and there's a monastery on it. It's a very powerful monastery at the time, and I think even after the sacking, it stays important, but I can't remember now. Either way, monasteries are prime targets if you are wanting to raid, because one, they're generally not defended. They don't tend to invest heavily in fortifications. Two, they are repositories of wealth that the people around them feel would be wrong to steal. And three, they I guess that's kind of it. They don't really have defenders, like they don't have fortifications, but they also tend not to have soldiers. It's just a bunch of peace-loving monks hanging out, and so they're just a prime target if you want to go raiding. And as I mentioned, with some centralization of power back in Scandinavia, there is a strong desire to kind of break out on your own, either under the authority of the king or as a kind of freelancer. And raiding seems like a great way to get valuables, and a great way to increase your prestige back home. It's important to note that in the first kind of generation of the Viking Age, I guess I should cover what So Viking is kind of a verb. To go a Viking means to go on a raid. We've sort of just homogenized it out to just refer to, these people as Vikings, but I think technically they would be going a Viking, not technically a Viking themselves, but whatever. But the purpose for for this first generation really is raid, plunder, go home, because you want to improve your standing back home. And so what we're going to see is assaults on centers of wealth, but not a lot of sticking around afterwards. So Lindisfarne is sacked in 793. Ireland. So if we go back to our map here, Lindisfarne is here on the east coast of Britain, but the raids are not restricted to the east coast. Why can't you just blank it all out? Oh, there we go. So raids happen all along these coasts here. And over time, you actually get Viking settlements developing. And actually, kind of a little bit here and a little bit here. They raid so much that they sort of start sticking around. But I thought this was rather funny. I've always been taught that Dublin is founded by Vikings. And going through the text here, there's a concerted effort to talk about pre-Viking Dublin. And so I think that there's, with Myth was here, he could give the Irish perspective on this. But I think that there's a concerted effort in modern day Ireland to disabuse the people that that Dublin was founded by the Vikings. But generally speaking, the city of Dublin is founded by the Vikings. There may have been a settlement there, but it was unimportant. But it's very important if you are a sea-based raiding power that wants to connect with all of your buddies up in these islands here and around the coast. And so one of the first settlements that start to develop is Dublin. But there's raiding all across Ireland. Ireland at this point is covered in monasteries. There is a very famous monastery called, and I'm blanking on it now because it's important. Why would I remember it? Of course not. Kells is interior. Iona. So it's actually up here. So this island here, it's very small. It's part of modern day Scotland, but at this point in time, it's very much a part of Irish culture and kind of Irish monastic culture. So I'm not going to go into too much of the history of the region at the time, but the monastery of Iona was kind of the premier monastery for the kind of Gaelic region. And Viking raids, because this is very, very exposed, sort of ended that preeminence. And for Irish monasticism, they went more inwards, and a monastery in Kells, you can tell it's kind of more inland, starts to be the head kind of head honcho for monasteries at the time. But so Viking attacks are kind of occurring all over the coastal regions of what is now the modern day UK and Ireland. And they are, in theory, perpetuated by Ragnar Lothbrok. Now, this is a kind of mytho-historical figure. He's the main character in the TV series Vikings, and he's quite the character. But it's important to know that he is not a. Sorry, I'm just reading a text here from somebody who had to drop out. He's like many so I use this term mytho-historical figure, and what that means is that it's possible that someone was historical and named Ragnar Lothbrok, but did they do all of the things that the kind of sagas ascribe to him? Probably not, because it's just so expansive and impressive. But who knows? We can't actually say for sure. But raids under Ragnar, he kind of goes everywhere across the UK, but also into continental Europe. Around this time, there's raids on Muslim Seville. So Seville is in the southwest of Spain. So down here. And there's also Viking raids on Paris. The siege of Paris in 845 is repelled. I think I don't think that they actually get in, but I think they're bought off. Pardon me.
Correct.
Okay, there you go. I'm like, I'd have to reread it just to be sure. I prepared, but not that much, I guess. I had to go by memory. And so, but you may notice Paris is not on the coast. Paris is inland, but Paris is attached to rivers. And so the Vikings, actually, this image here shows that Europe is actually a continent that is navigable by rivers as long as your boats are good enough, and the rivers are high enough, like the water is seasonally high. And so the Vikings are able to actually penetrate deep into the continent as long as it's along a river system. And historically, very wealthy cities are along river systems because they're excellent for transport of goods. And so this is great if you're a pirate and a raider, because now you've got access to all of these cities that are used to just sending goods out and not defending themselves. And this era kind of culminates in the 860s. I put up here the Siege of Constantinople. So this is one of those that's a really well-defended city, and it doesn't. Again, they get bought off. They don't. They aren't able to take the city. But after the Siege of Constantinople, the raiding party continues on. So they start off in June, and they raid Constantinople. Then Viking chieftains Hastein and Bjorn Ironside. Bjorn Ironside is a purported son of Ragnar Lothbrok. And what you will see is that there's a series of real historical people: Bjorn Ironside, Ivar the Boneless. I can't remember. Those are the only two that I remember off the top of my head. And these individuals are real people, historical people, and then they get a mytho-historical connection to Ragnar Lothbrok. It's possible that he was their father and he had sons. That's the Vikings TV show. That's what it portrays. But we just don't know for sure. But they raid Italy. They sack the city of Luna, thinking it's Rome. Then they go up the river Arno and sack Pisa and Tuscany. So again, Pisa is a coastal city. Pisa is one of these. Come on. Why are you not showing up? I'm in the right spot, aren't I? Yeah, Pisa. Here we go. Pisa is one of the major trade powers of the era, but Tuscany is inland. But if you go up the river, I think this is the River Arno here. You can get in there and you can sack places like Florence. Although I don't know if Florence is important yet. What does it say? Where do they raid? Fiesole. Right here. So yeah, this would have been the city at the time. Florence probably wasn't as built up at the time. And so the 860s are just filled with Viking raids. The Vikings are, the authors of the day refer to them as like a plague on Christendom. That they just won't let up. Every year there's new raids, even if it's not a major city. There's just constant fear and constant attacks, and this really continues up until the 860s, and then that first generation of raiding kicks off. It stops. But a new generation, what is the oh, there's a joke. What let the rain? Oh, the Futurama. Let the tyranny of the old pharaoh come to an end, and the tyranny of the new pharaoh begin. This is when Bender becomes pharaoh of New Egypt, a planet. And so a whole new generation comes in with plans on establishing colonies and settling. But that's kind of in the next setup. Any questions on the kind of raiding and settlements and stuff? I kind of jump over these things. I apologize if it's not as well organized as I'd hoped.
Sounds good to me.
Were the Vikings more similar to pirates or more land-based than history were to suggest them to be?
Land-based.
Well, so they're not conducting piracy on the high seas. They are attacking land-based targets, as Farmer said. But that's because ship-to-ship combat is weird. In the kind of ancient period and the medieval period, ship-to-ship combat is less ship-to-ship combat and more ram them, and so that you can board them and fight them like it's land. And so generally what we're seeing is raids on coastal territories, coastal settlements, or riverine settlements along rivers, as long as those rivers do lead to the sea. But it is perfectly analogous to piracy as long as you ignore the at the high seas attacks, because pirates would also, like, if you think of Pirates of the Caribbean, they would attack land targets as well. They would raid settlements and so on. It's just that it was much easier to attack ships at sea because there's just the ship. They don't have the coastal guns. They don't have all of these coastal defenses. But in the 860s, there's none of that. That doesn't exist yet. Coastal defenses do exist, but it's much less sophisticated than 800 years later. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next section here. So another son of Ragnar Lothbrok is Ivar the Boneless. Oh, apparently this was led by 3 of his 5 sons: Halfdan Ragnarsson, Ivar the Boneless, and Ubba. This is the Great Heathen Army. They didn't choose that name for themselves. Just throwing that out there. This is a different assault. It starts going in 865, so kind of just after these raids of the early 860s. And this is half raiding party and half settlement. They want to take territory. And what they attack into, England at this time is not a unified kingdom. It's under the dominion of what's called the Septarchy. Oops. Sorry, Heptarchy. Heptarchy? Heptarchy. Yeah. It's I guess 6, not 8 or not 7. I don't even know. No, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Anyway, Heptarchy. So there's a series of smaller kingdoms that are part of what is now modern day England. And they don't always get along. They in fact fight with each other more often than not. And when the great heathen army lands, and it lands kind of in what becomes Northumbria, I'm not sure if it's Northumbria at the time. All the other kingdoms kind of just don't care. Like, oh, whatever. If Northumbria takes it, like, at least we didn't have to fight them. But this very quickly becomes a bad plan because the Great Heathen Army is really big and really powerful. And it bowls over armies that are sent against it. And they're able to do raids very far inland. They're able to do raids of not just coastal territories. And instead of taking it all the way back to Norway or Denmark or Sweden, they take whatever they steal back to York, which is a city that they refound. So modern day York was founded by the Norse invaders. It was called Jorvik, but it is on the site of an older settlement called Eboracum. Eboracum was a Roman settlement. I don't know how, it probably wasn't very populated at the time of the Norse attacks, but it would have been like ruins that they would have built upon to establish Jorvik. But one thing that an external enemy has the ability to do, if you survive their attacks, is it can consolidate resistance. The differences between each other seem a lot less important when you've got, this massive army rampaging through the countryside. And so Alfred the Great, who was king of Wessex, one of these smaller kingdoms, kind of rises up as a sort of overking. And he either conquers or through diplomacy takes control of most of the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and is not able to defeat the Great Heathen Army in that they leave, but he's able to fight them enough to a standstill that they agree to sort of coexist. And this is after decades. And what this is Scandinavian York. What this results in is the establishment of what's called the Dane Law in England. And so this area outlined in red is a Danish Viking kingdom. It is, for all intents and purposes, its own independent kingdom. It is at the initial onset not Christian, so it is they don't care about the monasteries and Christian establishment, and at least at first, it is hostile because they conquered that region away, and initially they have the city of London. They eventually give that up, but still, it's a big chunk of England that they take, and this persists for centuries. The Danelaw, so much so that in modern day dialects of English in the UK, they are impacted from the Scandinavian settlement in the north of England. That is one of the major contributors to the accent differences in the north versus the south. In addition to conquering a big chunk of England, in this new era, Vikings conquer the Faroe Islands. They start doing all kinds of fuckery in Scotland. They attack the Scottish king. They don't officially conquer parts of mainland Scotland. I don't think, anyway. But they do take outer. They do take the outer and inner Hebrides, and that leads to a kind of new people group, the Norse Gaels. So these are Gaelic and Norse people that have kind of come together, and over time they kind of adopt aspects of their different culture from each other. And this region, particularly the island of Mull and Skye, are historically where my family is from. So we would not consider ourselves Norse Gaels, but I do have a red beard, and that came from somewhere. And so the impact can be felt, many generations later. The Isle of Man was a Norse kingdom, and this is the Orkney Islands and Shetland Islands. The Norse also, and this kind of time jumps a little bit because I wanted to cover this region. The Norse settle Iceland as well. So if we jump back to our map, Iceland is here, and you can see that there's blue. There's deep blue here. So they did not go from here to here. But what they were able to do is there's the Faroe Islands. Here is Orkney and the Shetland Islands. And you're able to jump island chains. So you can disembark.
Is
There's-
that because they had to like get food or something, or
No, it's because their boats were unable to handle the deeper ocean. So this
is it
light,
like rougher seas out there?
yes, it's very much rougher seas, deeper ocean, bigger
Okay.
swells, bigger waves. Boats are no one's boat technology is able to handle the deep ocean until the age of sail, and that's how like the Spanish and the Portuguese are able to get a head start on kind of everyone else on the world because they develop hulls that can withstand the battering of the open ocean before anybody else. And they're the first ocean-going vessels that exist. So the Norse also settle in Greenland, and for those that understand geography, that's awful close to North America, and of course that's where the settlement in North America comes from. It was an offshoot of the colony in Greenland. Now, this is something that people don't actually talk about a whole lot, but the colony on Greenland actually dies out. So Greenland right now, today, is a dependency of the Kingdom of Denmark, and the inhabitants of Greenland are primarily Greenlandic peoples. They're related to Inuit. Their language is actually mutually intelligible. If Greenland were part of Canada, we would call them Inuit, but I'm not sure if that's appropriate to say so. I don't know what they self-identify as, but the Norse settlement died out, and it did get started up again centuries later. Initially, the colony was, I believe, a Norwegian foundation, but it was started up centuries later by Denmark, because I think at that point in time Denmark had merged. They were one kingdom between Norway and Denmark. But we often talk about how the settlement in North America died out, and people understand that like it's a really far distance and so on. But it's also part of the settlement in Greenland also dying out. There was also resistance. We talk about the resistance to much later European colonization. Depending on what area in North America or South America, it can range from not very strong to quite strong, but still ultimately unsuccessful. The resistance to the Norse colonization in both Greenland and North America not only was it strong, it was successful. The local indigenous population didn't want anybody that wasn't one of them hanging around, and they succeeded in kind of wiping them out or making them leave. I think that they were wiped out in Greenland, but I think that they were able to leave in North America. But I can't 100% remember. But the overall trend is away from constant raiding and an embracing of permanent settlements. And that's basically what we see here. So I did jump ahead a little bit chronologically because the North American settlement doesn't happen until the late 900s. So we're going to jump back a little bit in time because I want to talk about another character named Rollo. He's another Viking raider who wants to start establishing his own domain. And he is alive throughout the late 800s and into the early 900s. In the Vikings TV show, Rollo is made the brother of Ragnar Lothbrok, and his time period is skewed where he's earlier, because Ragnar Lothbrok, if he did exist, is palling around, I think, about 70 years earlier. So Rollo was a real person, and he decided that he was one of the Viking leaders that was raiding northern France. And eventually, he made a deal with the King of France that he would occupy northern France, protect it from further Viking raiders, and in exchange, he would become a duke under the king. He would become a vassal, but he would get all of these lands. And this is the birth of what we call Normandy. Normandy being kind of the land of the North people. He was a Northman. He was a Norseman. And the people of Normandy are Normans. Now, we will not forget about the Normans because they continue to have impact. Even though Rollo, even by the end of his life, kind of acculturates to his French surroundings. And they, for the most part, Rollo Christianizes. That's most important. And they largely abandon their Scandinavian roots. There still are connections that develop with time, and we'll go over those. So this is the geography of the Duchy of Normandy. And then not long after becoming Dukes of Normandy, Norman relatives conquer the Kingdom of Sicily. So that's Sicily and southern Italy. So there's just Normans everywhere. They go on a conquering spree. Okay, so that's it for that section. Does anybody have questions on what I've covered so far?
I'm good. You're doing a good job.
Yeah.
I like your technical difficulty screen.
Yeah, I definitely stole that from The Simpsons.
No.
I've used that when I would stream, the one and a half times that I streamed HOTS games. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions, then I'm going to jump into kind of the last section on the Vikings. And we come back to Harold Bluetooth, or... Okay, hold on. I can see it here. Blaton? Farmer, are you still here?
Blotan.
Blotan. Okay, I wasn't sure how to handle an accent grave on an A in kind of Iceland. Oh, I see. It's not supposed to be. Oh no, it changes. It changes. Never mind. Anyhow, Harald Blotan.
It's good.
So Harald Bluetooth is a unifier, as we kind of very briefly mentioned, but he's also he Christianizes as well. So he is wanting to integrate his kingdom instead of being the raiders on the periphery of Europe. He wants his kingdom to start kind of integrating into and becoming a part of the normal way of, commerce and war, but like, the normal functioning of states within Europe. And so a prerequisite for that is that he Christianizes, and he starts the process of Christianizing Scandinavia because he is king over both Denmark and Norway. I don't know how much sway he might have over Sweden at this time, but in any event, he starts the process of Christianization on the entire region, and this is outlined in the Yelling Stone, which is a fairly elaborate inscription. There's two of them here. This more square one was set up by his son, and I thought that they would be covered in protective. I guess that's 2004. They hadn't done that yet. There are inscriptions on here that talk about the Christianization of, at the very least, his royal family. Okay, here's more modern. So hoping to get a close-up of, because apparently there's a depiction of Jesus on one of these stones. I thought that was rather interesting.
Where's that again?
Pardon me?
Where's that again?
On the Yelling stones, there's apparently a depiction of Jesus on them. I just
Where's the Yelling Stones?
they're in Yelling. Sorry, they're in Denmark. The location is Yelling. We've got it here. This is the Jutland Peninsula, or Jutland Peninsula, and these are the Yelling stones in Yelling, Denmark.
Okay.
I can bring up a map, and East Yelling should be somewhere in the middle here. I guess it's not a very big settlement, but kind of in this area here.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have made that
Thank you,
more
that
clear
sounds-
instead of being snarky. Apologize for that.
No worries.
Okay, so this process of Christianization really fundamentally changes Norse culture in throughout Scandinavia, because you can't really go around raiding monasteries if you're a Christian. It's not done. It's just not so, unless it's the Reformation, and that's a different story altogether. And so this really changes the nature. It's not that Viking, because one, not all Scandinavians have become Christian at this point, and two, not everyone agrees or follows Harold Bluetooth. So even if they were, maybe they want to keep raiding. Maybe they want to keep going about their Viking business. But it is a shift, a very dramatic shift towards kind of less the scourge of God and constant raids, and more, all right, I think we've weathered the storm, and we're just starting to see periodic raids and periodic assaults. And now it's more state level threats like people are used to experiencing. Back in England, we have seen the kind of temporary unification a few centuries earlier under Alfred the Great has more or less solidified, and there's a series of Anglo-Saxon kings I didn't want to go into them because, frankly, it was just they fought with the Danelaw, but it was really just like state to state. There wasn't like Viking raids kind of thing. Until eventually we get to, and this is in the late 900s and early 1000s, we get to Ethelred the Unready. And he's called the Unready because I think it's actually that he was poorly what's what I'm trying to, his advisors were poor. But I can't remember now. I think that they might cover evil counsel. The Anglo-Saxon Unrad means evil counsel, bad plan, or folly. So, he's the ill-advised or the ill-prepared. But Ethelred will lose his kingdom to a Norse invader, basically. Sven Forkbeard, who was king of Norway and king of Denmark, and took the kingdom of England away from Ethelred the Unready. And what this meant was, very briefly, the Danelaw and the kingdom of England were unified, as was the kingdom of Denmark and the kingdom of Norway. Now, Sven Forkbeard died pretty quick, and his kingdoms all split apart. Ethelred the Unready actually became king of England again, but he did not have dominion over the Danelaw. However, I believe that this is Ethelred's son. Sorry, this is Sven Forkbeard's son, Canute the Great. Canute the Great reclaims his father's throne in Denmark and Norway, but also reclaims his father's throne over England. And again, he controls both England and the Danelaw, and Norway and Denmark. But his reign is longer lasting, and he unites it into. And this is a historian's term. This is not something that he would have called it, but historians refer to it as the North Sea Empire. So, Canute the Great, for a period of time, was the second most powerful ruler in Western Europe because of the kind of vast territory that he controlled. And this is going to lay the foundations for the end of Anglo-Saxon rule in England. Right now, Anglo-Saxons are under their kind of close cousins, the Danes. But in a very short amount of time, so I'm going to get to that here. I have a Harthacnut on here because he eventually succeeds. So he's not an immediate successor to Canute the Great, but he is a successor in that he controls that entire North Sea Empire. So there's this process where indigenous leaders in England are taking control, and then Norwegian or Danish leaders are taking control, and there's this tension back and forth. And then we get a local English leader, Edward the Confessor. When he passes away, anyone who knows anything about history, Edward the Confessor dies in the year 1066. What does anybody know about the year 1066 and how it might be important for England? Okay, I can just jump in if not a problem.
No idea.
Okay, 1066. Edward the Confessor dies, and he is replaced by Harold Godwinson. But immediately, Harold Godwinson's throne in England is claimed by the Norwegian king, Harald Hardrada, as well as William, Duke of Normandy, also known as William the Bastard, also known as William the Conqueror. Harold first goes to defeat an invading force by Harold. It's the Battle of the Heralds. And he successfully defeats the Norwegian attack. And so England will not be ruled by Vikings anymore. We've defeated the Norwegians. But then, and that's the Battle of Stamford Bridge. But then he immediately has to go all the way south to meet another invading army from William of Normandy, who has a very poor claim on the throne. It's through his mother. And that is the Battle of Hastings that Harold Godwinson loses. And William becomes King of England and King of the Danelaw and King of all the things. And he is technically a descendant of the of Rollo, who was a Viking leader that conquered Normandy from the King of France. And so eventually, after centuries, even though culturally they change, change to adapt to local conditions, England comes under the dominion of former Vikings in the form of William, Duke of Normandy, and all. So modern day Charles III is a direct descendant of William, Duke of Normandy. The entire royal family, the English royal family, from this point forward is, and I guess actually because the Scottish royal family inherits, and we're going to talk about that in a bit, in the authoritarianism section. But yeah, that's that is what is that. That's the 1,000-year dynasty as established in England. Usually, kind of discussions of the Viking era kind of stop here because there's not a whole lot that you can defend as Viking activity beyond this. But I did want to bring up there's Sven II of Denmark and Magnus Barefoot. They both kind of continue a Vikinging, at least a little bit. They go on some raids. But Svein, apologies. Appreciate the correction. But basically, by the end of the 11th century, by the end of the 1000s, Viking activity is fully and truly gone for the most part. But there's still connection between, let's say, the island of Great Britain and Norway, because the Faroe Islands, the Shetland Islands, and Orkney still belong to Norway. And over the centuries, they all eventually come to be possessions of the King of Scotland. And it's actually, for a period of time, and my family history kind of ties in with this, after the Norse leaders are overthrown, they were called the King of the Isles in the Outer Hebrides. There is kind of a local Highland leader, and he's known as Lord of the Isles. He doesn't claim the title of king, and he runs his own independent lordship of Scotland for a few centuries, and my family is kind of under him until eventually Scotland kind of conquers the lordship of the Isle as well. And so they gain possession of all these former Viking islands. And I just wanted to throw this guy in here, Ingvar the Far-Traveled. He's a Swedish Viking who, in the late 11th century or mid 11th century, went traveling all the way to the Kingdom of Georgia, which is here. So he would have followed the riverine routes here, come out into the Caspian or Black Sea, and traveled to Georgia, and then went home to tell the tale. I missed. I didn't cover this. Along the way, so I did mention that there were raids on Constantinople. What I didn't cover is that the Vikings actually become kind of an honor guard and personal defense of the emperor in Constantinople, the Varangian Guard. And so people who are born in Sweden kind of go and become Varangians in Constantinople, and then they come back home, and after they've done their however many years of service, and they erect rune stones, sometimes with Christian themes. They may have Christianized in their trip, but also they have money, and I think actually this that coin is from a former Varangian. That's why I have it on there. But also in their travels back and forth, they found they wreck and then refound a bunch of cities, including the modern city of Kiev. So there is a local nobility that establishes themselves, and they were Vikings, and they set themselves up in Kiev. But very quickly, they just like Rollo adapted to the French culture here, and the Danes in England, they kind of merged with the Anglo-Saxons to become the modern day English. The royal family that sets themselves up in Kiev and a few other cities here, they Slavicize. They become like the local Slavic populations, but they were originally Viking settlements. Kiev, there was Novgorod, and these were all large trading centers in the Middle Ages. You may have heard of a phrase or of a state called Kievan Rus. It was less a state and more just a bunch of independent city-states, but still, that was founded by Vikings that quickly Slavicized to their local populations. But yeah, for the most part, that's what I had to say on the Vikings. Are there any questions on the Vikings? Any conversation starters people want to dive into and delve into further? Anything that didn't make sense that you want further information on? Okay then. All right. Well,
Pretty good.
that's what I had to say about the Vikings. Now, I can kind of jump into authoritarianism. Now, this is, I mean, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I'm talking about authoritarianism because of the presidency of Donald Trump. And the reason I wanted to talk about authoritarianism is I wanted to emphasize, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I keep in mind, I am not an American. I do not have to deal with him as president, other than when he gets pissed off at my country. I'm a Canadian. But I wanted to emphasize the things in his rulership style that concerned me most, and also that I could most defensively point to as like this is authoritarianism. I didn't use terms like dictatorship or fascism because people will get into endless arguments and debates over what really is fascism and what actually constitutes a dictatorship. Very intelligent people who I have a great respect for, let's just as a for instance, refuse to refer to modern day Russia as a dictatorship. They will still say it is a flawed democracy. And I can't get behind that because there's very little democratic anything left in modern day Russia.
Like you got democracy, but then you got the fact is, there's the kind of voting situation that comes with democracy.
Well, you're allowed to vote. It's just that you're only allowed to vote for the people that they, put forward.
Yep.
And there's rampant vote rigging. But in any event, so what is authoritarianism? What actually is authoritarianism? I will say, in every single system of government, no matter what, there is an element of authoritarianism. There's a big, long, complicated kind of description here, but I will say that the simplest form of authoritarianism is getting someone to do something they don't want to do. That's the core of authoritarianism. Essentially forcing someone to do something they don't want to do. Now, ultimately, if you think about that, it's like, well, there's all kinds of times when that's warranted. And it's true. There's all kinds of times when individual rights don't make sense in the face of kind of the, as Hot Fuzz puts it, the greater good. But, sometimes that is overshot. And we have not enough respect given to individual rights. And so another thing that I wanted to draw attention to in a description of authoritarianism is the distinction between the rule of law and the rule of man. Now, these are kind of esoteric political science terms, but they boil down to, in a system of government where you have the rule of law, these laws are published, they are knowable, and so you know not only how to avoid being prosecuted, but when you are prosecuted, you are informed of the reason why. You are informed of what law you broke, how you broke it, and are given a fair trial in how to, prove your innocence. In the rule of man, it's capricious. It's whatever whoever's in charge wants. You can be charged with a crime. You may not be informed of what it is. You could be thrown in prison. You may not have a chance to defend yourself. You may be elevated above all of your friends and neighbors, but again, for no rhyme or reason other than the whims of the ruler in charge. And generally speaking, the more a system of government adheres to the rule of law, the less authoritarian it is. That's not a guarantee, because you can have very authoritarian laws, but when laws and norms are broken, you are very much in more authoritarian territory. And that's when you should be concerned. Another aspect that helps authoritarianism greatly is centralization. I mentioned in the Vikings talk that increasing centralization of the powers of the kingdoms of Norway and Denmark and so on prompted people to kind of want to go out on their own. But there's no such thing as what we consider like modern day centralization in the ancient world and the medieval world, even the early modern world. The power to know what other aspects of government are thinking and the power to control how they react is just over the moon today than it has been in any other time period in history. And what that means is that we have very centralized governments. Very, very centralized governments. And that doesn't mean automatically they are authoritarian, but it does mean it's very easy for them to do authoritarian things coordinated over a wide area, and it's harder for individual citizens to react. And so this is why historically you have seen movements against centralization, and that is because people assume the government will be authoritarian, and so they want a less centralized government, so when the government tries to be authoritarian, they're just not as effective at it. That's kind of a theory background to the whole concept of authoritarianism in government. Does anybody want me to go over anything from that, or does that all make sense, at least as far as you're all concerned for the purposes of this chat?
Seems good.
Okay. All right. I will also say, until very, very, very recently, every single government throughout history has been authoritarian. And even governments that we talk about in our history books as being democratic, and I'm going to cover them here. Ancient Athens, the origins of democracy. Draco was a lawgiver in ancient Athens. Now, technically, he's the lawgiver before Athens' full transition to democracy, but they keep the draconian code within their democracy, so I'm covering it. Draco assigns a whole lot of laws, and those laws are known, so that's good. But the penalty is always death. And so when a government has control over your very ability to be alive, that is an authoritarian move. It doesn't matter how, then this is what I'm talking about, where you may have rule of law, but the actions of the government can still be overtly authoritarian because they can put you to death because, you picked the wrong flowers. And Draco's laws, that's why we have the modern term draconian. That's a draconian measure. It's because Draco only had one punishment for breaking the law, and that was kill you. In ancient Athens, there was also the establishment of the process of ostracism. An ostraca is a little fragment of pottery, and every year, the citizens of Athens would get together and have a vote. And what that vote would be, they'd all be given a little ostraca, and then write the name of somebody they hated. And then they would put that into a big pile. And then everyone would look at the big pile and count up all the times a certain name was mentioned. And whoever got the most votes lost all their property and was kicked out of the country. Ostracization. I think it was for a period of 10 years. I can't quite remember. Regardless, that's an extremely authoritarian move. We don't like what you're doing. You lose all your property and you have to leave. And, you've not broken a law that we can tell. You've not, done any. We just don't like you. And the mob doesn't like you.
Yeah, the most number of people don't like you.
Exactly. That's terrifying. And this is the birthplace of democracy. So authoritarianism, as I emphasize this, I cannot emphasize this enough. Every single government from before the modern era, from before, 1750, was authoritarian. And most governments since 1750 have been authoritarian. Another thing from Athens, they formed what was officially called the Delian League, and this was a series of allies that they developed to defeat the Persians. Modern historians also sometimes refer to it as the Athenian Empire, because while it was voluntary to enter the Delian League, you weren't allowed to leave. And when Naxos tried to leave, Athens attacked the city, and I don't know if they quite burned it to the ground, but they enacted massive penalties on Naxos, and it was forced to stay in the league. And everyone else knew the message was clear. Athens is in charge, and we're not allowed to go anywhere. That's authoritarian foreign policy. Another historical example is in the Roman Republic and later Empire. There was a position called the Tribune of Plebs. You don't need to know anything about this, other than they were granted what's called sacrosanct status. What did that mean? Literally, if you touch them, you could be put to death. Their body was not allowed to be touched in any way, shape, or form. Now, generally, it was about assault. You weren't allowed to beat them up. but if you even touched them, you could be put to death. Not too many people these days try to claim that the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic was democratic. It had democratic aspects to it. But again, I just wanted to emphasize the power over killing someone for touching you is a really authoritarian move. I also wanted to bring up the Roman Empire or the Roman period because a symbol of authority in the Roman Republic and later Empire was a fasces. And that is a bundle of sticks with an axe. So it's bundled together, and then you have an axe centered in it. And if that looks familiar, it's because it became, in the 20th century, a symbol of fascism, which is a form of authoritarian government. The guards, they're called lictors, the guards of Roman, the technical term we use is magistrates. These are kind of the representatives of the Roman government. Each representative was allocated a certain number of guards, a certain number of lictors with fasces. And it was a symbol of power and prestige, but also don't touch them because you'll get put to death. And this was so powerful that modern day dictators looked at that and said, yes, that's a symbol we want to appropriate to kind of get across the ideals of our perspective. Yes, but exactly, no touchy. Moving into the Middle Ages, I'm not going to go over as many examples here, but just broadly, the history of serfdom. If you were in the 90% of people in Europe, you were almost certainly a serf during the Middle Ages. And what that meant was you did not have the ability to move freely throughout the world. You were born most likely on a plot of land, and you had to stay on that plot of land your entire life. Maybe you were born in a town. But the fact of the matter is you just did not have freedom of movement. The government controlled where you could go and what you could do. This is formalized in what's called the estates system. And each country had their own different estates. It's most famously associated with France. And they've got the first estate, the second estate, and the third estate. The first estate is the clergy. The second estate is the nobility. And the third estate is literally everybody else, which I think in this article they refer to as 98% of the population. Let's see. 98% of France's population is in the third estate. Now, you might be a burgher, you might be a rich city dweller, but chances are you are not going to be that. You are going to be a peasant who's bound to a plot of land, and you can't go anywhere, and you can't do anything. So, authoritarianism throughout history is the norm, and we should not like that. We should want to keep up our democratic difference in the modern age. The ability to be an authoritarian ruler over the course of the Middle Ages and into the Reformation and post-Reformation period, so we're kind of into the 1600s now, just to kind of give you an idea, is enshrined in what gets called the divine right of kings. The idea being that a king was put on this earth as a direct representative of God for the secular world, for the physical world. And since they are there as God's representative, fuck off. No touchy. You can't do anything against them. And that's just, again, a fundamental authoritarian maneuver. This led to an era called absolutism, where absolute monarchs reigned over most of the kingdoms in Europe, and they tried to do whatever and whenever they pleased. And this leads us to the reason why I wanted to do this evening. It is November 5th. And for those of you probably who watched V for Vendetta, or who are British and just know this because you're British, remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder treason and plot. an individual named Guy Fawkes. He's the face of the gunpowder treason and plot, but he was only one of the participants. And in V for Vendetta, he is kind of raised up as a figure of defiance of government, of defiance of authoritarianism. And I mean, he kind of is. He wants to murder the king and the entirety of Parliament because at this point in time, the king and Parliament are Protestant. Guy Fawkes is Catholic, and he wants to have a Catholic on the throne. He doesn't want to have a Catholic on the throne so that there's peace and love for everyone. He wants a Catholic on the throne so the oppression that's currently directed at Catholics can instead be turned around and directed at Protestants. So it's, authoritarianism all the way down. But he's remembered in Britain as just a villain. They burn effigies of him on Guy Fawkes Night. But in V for Vendetta, he's somewhat recast as this freedom fighter. And yeah. So that's why I wanted to bring up. That's why I wanted to do that this evening, because I thought it was age appropriate, or not age appropriate, time appropriate. This all starts to shift during the Age of Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a specific European kind of intellectual movement that, for the first time in human history, posits maybe you're not just a tool of the ruler of the day. Maybe you have, as a human being, inalienable rights. This is where the U.S. Constitution comes from, and this is where our modern sense of democracy comes from. That just for being alive, not because of your hereditary title, not because of your position within the church, and not because of the amount of money that you've accumulated, just for being alive, you have certain rights. And only an authoritarian would infringe upon those rights. This is a revolutionary idea. And in fact, it's revolutionary in the United States. It's revolutionary in France. And while it doesn't spark revolutions in every country across Europe, because of the French Revolution and the conquests of Napoleon, the Enlightenment, or at least Enlightenment political ideals, are spread throughout the continent. And eventually they take hold in Britain too. I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek there. But there's also a reaction against this Enlightenment. And it is called the era of enlightened absolutism, where you will find monarchs in Europe who say, okay, you know what? The people can say whatever. This is one of the kings of Prussia famously said that. The people can say what they want, and I can do what I want. Where they embrace aspects of the Enlightenment, aspects of freedom of the press, freedom of religion, but they are still firmly embedded in kind of the divine right of kings and the ability of the monarch to have authoritarian rule over everyone. In the modern day, so since the beginning of the 20th century, we can see anti-Enlightenment ideas in a lot of places. One of them is in the spread of communism, where the idea is to establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. And what is supposed to happen is you establish the dictatorship, you infringe on everyone's rights, but you use this infringement to educate them on the proper glory that is communism, and then you can transition to proper classless communism where everyone lives in a utopia. And they just never seem to get to that part. They just really get stuck on the whole dictatorship. and then nobody has any rights, or whatever rights are firmly circumscribed to very, very specific areas. And this is what I think of personally as a major flaw in the system. But it's not restricted to communism. Reactionary governments all across the 20th century. So Mussolini in Italy, Hitler in Germany, and then Franco in Spain, who was in power until 1975, by the way. And then Salazar in Portugal, who was in power until 1968. We tend to think of the dictatorships, at least in Europe, or Western Europe, I guess, as a factor of the mid-century, but they persist into the late 20th century. And these folks all are undemocratic. They are all authoritarians at heart. They believe that people cannot govern themselves. And so they are going to go through and have the right way to do things. And it doesn't matter how many people have to die for that to go forward. In very, very modern day, we can see in Europe here Alexander Lukashenko. He's the so-called president of Belarus, but I mean, he's just president for life. He's been in power since 1994. He used to be called the last dictator in Europe, but now Putin, has joined his ranks. And then Putin was the other one that I was going to talk about. All of this kind of leads to a discussion about Donald Trump. And where, at least for me, from an authoritarianism perspective, where does he concern me and why? And I'm going to say that this is probably going to upset a great number of progressive or left-wing Americans, because so much of what Donald Trump does is offensive on a moral level from their left-wing or progressive politics angle. And I'm not going to talk about that at all, because it might suck, but it's not necessarily authoritarian. Just like in this country, I disagree with, I guess he's gone for the evening, but I disagree with that usage of the notwithstanding clause. It's part of the Constitution. It's to a certain extent, it's an authoritarian move. So there is that. It can usurp your rights, but it is constitutional. So in that instance, it's not against the law. Our Constitution has authoritarian aspects to it. And there are things that Donald Trump is doing that are authoritarian, but are also within the Constitution. So, or at least they could be, or they theoretically are. So what I wanted to do is emphasize the things that, at least for me as an outsider, are firmly not okay. No, there's no defense for this, and I don't understand why he got reelected. I don't understand a whole lot of things. So, the one thing that I will bring attention to is his constant calls to injure people. His constant calls for violence. This is from starting in 2015, and it just keeps going. And if we scroll all the way down, it goes all the way to 2024. I guess the article stopped there, but it's about how he would like to commit violence on people. Now, whether you're the president or not, when you beat somebody up, you are forcing them to do something they don't want to do. It's an authoritarian move. And generally speaking, assault is a crime. So it's a non-constitutional thing to do. And constantly asking for your supporters to go beat people up is terrifying. That is an authoritarian move that is inexcusable as far as I'm concerned. That is not the rule of man. That is not the rule of law. That is the rule of man. That is a capricious, violent person directing his mob to do violence. And that culminated in Trump's first term with calls to just shoot the racism protesters, go crack skulls, beat the fuck out of them. You know, really great presidential stuff. And that culminated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. Now, there are those that are very invested in saying that Trump did not order the attack on the Capitol, and so he's completely innocent in all forms of any mention of the January 6th attacks. I don't give a shit if it looks like he ordered them or not. I've seen the video, and he's certainly encouraging his supporters to do what they think they need to do. And since he spent 4 years prior to that talking about how he loves violence and he wishes supporters would go do violence on his enemies, I don't think it's a far reach to say that he instructed his supporters to go and attack the Capitol. But I will give it to you that he did not specifically, or not you, anyone in this room, but I will give it to someone, this theoretical individual that is trying to defend the Capitol riots, and say that he did not specifically give the order to attack. But the sheer fact that he created the environment to do the attack is, again, the rule of a man, not the rule of law, and is it is disqualifying in every shape and sense of the word. That is not a man who respects democracy. That is not a man who respects inalienable human rights. It is not a man who respects the Enlightenment. When we get into Trump's second term, which has only been going for a few months, the biggest ticket item I think of is the ICE raids and the building out of what is being called a secret police of sorts, or at the very least a paramilitary organization. I do not know the constitutionality of using ICE and very violent ICE raids to deport non-Americans. I don't know the gray area that he's operating there, where that could be defensible or could not. I'm not sure. It's certainly morally wrong, but I'm not here to talk about what is morally wrong. There's plenty morally wrong with Trump that I have not gone over. But American citizens have inalienable rights, and they are getting deported. They are getting caught up in violent attacks, and that's not okay. That is indefensible in any way, shape, or form, and that's not like that. That is just pure authoritarianism. And so, yeah, that's kind of that's all I had for this. I didn't want it to necessarily turn into just, man, do I really need to get this out about Donald Trump? But like I guess it is, and I guess I did, because, like I said, authoritarianism before the Enlightenment was the norm, and even since the Enlightenment, it's largely been the norm. We have to fight tooth and nail to maintain democracy because it is not the normal way of doing things. And there is exceedingly troubling backsliding going on in the United States right now. So that
The January 6th stuff, them saying that he didn't order it is technically BS. I have a lot of experience in what's considered undue influence, not only having it done to me, but how to do it to others. And what he was exerting is commonly called undue influence. This is encouraging someone to do a thing or getting them to do a thing without directly saying, do the thing. It's manipulation on an emotional level, on a psychological level, on a mental level. It's very, very abusive. And when people say, "Oh, he didn't influence them," I'm sorry, from a psychology standpoint, that's a lie. They are full of it.
Yeah. So, generally speaking, I disagree with the perspective that he didn't order it. So I'm in agreement with you on that. I just wanted to approach it from a sidestepping of that issue, because uh, it doesn't matter if he ordered it or not. The process that got us there is fundamentally authoritarian anyway, and so I don't need to emphasize that aspect, even though I believe that under certain definitions he did order it, as you outlined, as you point out. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
We're
he's a piece of work, that's for sure.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
For what it's worth, a lot of us that live in the U.S. also wonder how the hell this guy got elected. But it is a democracy, and uh,
Hmm. Well,
I my party doesn't always have to win, but I look forward to this guy losing.
Same. Same. Like I don't necessarily want my party to always win because that's not really a good representation of democracy. The idea is that both parties get their opportunities to voice for the people they represent and help the people they represent. But like what he's doing right now, he's trying to make it so that they always win. He's trying to push it so that he doesn't have to leave office, that he will make sure his party always wins in the future going forward. And that is so, so terrifying to me. Like,
Like with trying to find more seats for the Republican Party thing,
yeah.
the thing
so
that's recently going on.
yeah,
Yeah.
so any kind of maneuver to subvert the legitimacy of democratic elections, and I mean, he denied the legitimacy of the 2020 election for 4 years.
Mhm.
He still does to this day. Um, I may not like the outcome of the 2024 election, but I accept it. I don't think that there's any question. I think he even got over. Was it over 50% of the popular vote? It was. Either way, he won. Whatever the number was, he won. Um, but attempts to circumvent democratic norms, established norms, those are things to watch out for, and those are things to be most concerned about. Um, with the ICE raids, it it breaks my heart to see what the United States is doing to its potential new American population. But that's an emotional reaction and a moral objection. It is indefensible when they do that to their own citizens. Um, there is a defense, however horrific or however abysmal.
Yeah.
There is a defense to be able to do that to non-citizens. And that can figure its way out through the courts. But when you turn that power of the state on your own citizenry, that's just full authoritarianism. That's unacceptable.
Like the recent stuff with deploying the military to American cities.
Yeah, exactly. You are relying on war measures for that authority, and there's some sleight of hand that he's going through to try and make it so that, oh no, it's not the federal troops, it's state and state militias or whatever they're called. What are your National Guard, I guess, or from individual states, and then the
Uh,
military is just supporting them. But
mhm.
it's something to be gravely concerned about.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I have to go to LA every 6 months for my autoimmune issues to see a doctor at USC, and it is very unnerving when last time we went, heading home, coming the other direction, was a full armada of ice coming down the road, and they shut down the I-5 just behind us, and they were pulling cars over.
Wow.
And it's terrifying. It's horrible.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I don't
There's a lot
know.
of for the
well, sir-
color of their skin, the language they speak. It's horrid.
yeah, but that kind of is the long and the short of this discussion. I think we've dwindled out to a last few hangers on. So I appreciate everyone who came out to this evening. Thank you so much.
The
But
diehard.
I'm going to, I think I'm going to cut it off here. And I'll see you guys all. Oh, for those that
Oh,
stay to
yeah?
the end, next month
Mhm.
is December. And I
Oh,
was
yeah?
thinking I'm not going to do a vote for topics. I was going to do why is Christmas on December 25th as a subject,
Okay.
and then probably also some extra information on early Christianity. So that's
I
just a
would love that.
yeah. I figured it might be popular,
Yeah.
especially for December.
I mean,
That'd be
and
great.
for those of us who have left religion, especially for myself being in a group that they portrayed themselves as being Bible scholars, I really would like to hear more accurate information versus just the dribble that tended to come from the group that I was in.
Mm.
Because I found a lot of it as dribble.
I mean, every group has its. Not everyone is as scholastically inclined.
No. And they tried to say that they were. They're like, oh no, we're Bible scholars. Like they straight up say that. And then when you go do some research, you're like, yeah, no, you're full of it.
Mm. So that's something to look forward to for next month. I'm not sure exactly when in
Okay.
December I will do that. Probably mid month. I don't want to interfere with anybody's vacation plans. So yeah, we'll have that in about 6 weeks' time. So thanks for
I
coming
look
out,
forward to it.
and I'll see
Oh,
everybody next.
before you stop,
Mhm.
I have something to say.
There you go.
Oh my god.
There we go. Thanks, Band-Aid. That's a tribute to
You're welcome.
Weenus.
That's right. That's right.